Welcome to the Tech Ed Podcast, where we visit with leaders who are shaping, innovating, and disrupting technical education. People who are not afraid to think differently, not afraid to try something new, all with the goal of securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. Well, it's Matt Kirkner, your host for the Tech Ed Podcast. We are about 112, 113 episodes in on this podcast. And what we call the Tech Ed Podcast Alumni Circle, the circumference of that circle continues to grow. The circumference of that circle has grown now to over 100 guests. And we are at a point where some of the guests are starting to give us the opportunity to spend time with them once again. Today's episode is a perfect example. This individual is a member of the Tech Ed Podcast Alumni Circle, that esteemed group. He was on with us several years ago. And at the time, Ed Magee was doing some really, really cool stuff at Fender. You might remember that episode. He has a brand new role, and he's going to talk with us all about that role today, all about innovation in higher education, some of the challenges facing four-year universities and beyond. It's going to be a great conversation. But first, Ed, welcome back to the Tech Ed Podcast. And oh my goodness, I mean, your career path never ceases to amaze me. Congratulations on the new role. Tell us what you're up to.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's exciting to be here. And has it been 2 years? I mean, it seems like
going on it. Yeah. Hard to believe.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That's amazing. So just started a new role at Belmont University in Nashville. So it's wonderful to move back to Tennessee, and just plugging into the vibrancy of Nashville is, it's certainly worth a visit. But I'm joining Greg Jones and the university team here at Belmont in a really, really cool and exciting role. And again, it's one that feels like it was just made for me. So two kind of roles into one. The first one is Vice President for Strategic Initiatives. And that's taking a look at some new strategic initiatives at the university level, focused on our data collaborative, our Belmont Innovation Labs, and educational innovation. So the key words there are entrepreneurship and kind of startup mode. So these are new initiatives tied to Greg Jones's, he calls it his God-sized ambition. He wants to be the number one Christ-centered university in the world. And we've got to figure out how to operationalize that in a way that is recognizing the changes in the market, but also really tied to, how do we do things the right way? How do we create these quests that people want to sign up for and really deliver great outcomes? So I could talk a lot about more about it later, but it's a really, really unique role on the ops side. And then the other part of it, I'm bringing my operational experience to bear, in some places and spaces where they might have viewed things and processes a little bit differently. And Greg Jones has a great quote. He says, people often don't rise to their goals. They fall to their systems and habits.
Wow.
So the way that I always characterize my role now is I'm focused on systems and habits in order to deliver on these outcomes. And then the other piece, and we'll talk about a little bit, is the first executive in residence at the business school. So again, it gives me a great opportunity to work with Sarah Gaudiel and the team at the Massey College of Business in really defining the role and how do we bring talent into the university, both from an MBA standpoint to train and educate our faculty and just bring a sense of what the market is looking for to bear. So it's exciting role, and I'm just excited to be in Nashville and in Tennessee again.
I can feel the energy, the culture of the university is something we'll get into, but I can tell that that's alive and well, and something that's a part of you, and we'll talk about that. When we think about God-sized ambitions, oh my goodness, what a great way to characterize, what goal could be bigger than that? We might characterize your education pathway as God-sized in some fashion. Yeah. We'll just go into that briefly. Yeah. U.S. Naval Academy is a reminder for our listeners. George Mason University. You went through the business school at Duke University. Obviously, an incredible education pedigree that you got on your resume, Ed. So you're no stranger to higher education through that entire process and through that entire journey. Tell us a little bit about specifically what attracted you to Belmont University.
Yeah, so I think my background, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, as an operations professional, time in the Marine Corps, working for really great American brands, I've had a great opportunity to really dig into leadership and leadership development, especially from an operations standpoint. So, I always say running factories are just people businesses. You got processes, you make things, but if you don't invest in your people, and we talked about this last time, then you don't get the return on investment. You're not creating sustainable patterns for growth. I mean, there are a lot of bad things that happen when you don't acknowledge and respect and dignify the work that people put in every day when they walk into an organization. So I'm hitting almost 20 years of Marine Corps time or military time, 20 years in the corporate America, and I'm hitting that phase of my life where it's time to give back. It's time to teach. It's time to just apply a lot of the learnings. And I'm seeing that in the executive in residence role, because there are some great folks who are, done with their time in corporate America, but there's always a sense of, and this goes back to our earlier discussion, you got to have a sense of purpose, right? You got to have a sense of purpose. So what this role is actually doing is it's tying into my purpose. I love developing people. I love teaching. I've always been a teacher. And I've started leadership development programs at just about every company I've worked for and worked with. So it's a great opportunity to apply what I've learned and what I've done in the past. And again, just plugging into Greg's ambition and his desire to create something that hasn't existed before, and to pivot and to do all the things that great brands do, that motivates me. I love these big ambitious dreams, and I love getting after them.
Love being part of a big, ambitious dream. Here at the Tech Ed Podcast, we say we're securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. And literally, I get up every day focused on that. As we're recording this episode, I'm actually traveling through North Dakota, meeting with all of the career tech centers across this great state, and talk about a space that is absolutely dedicated to a mission of creating the workforce of the future. It's been resonating all week. The work that you're doing at a different level of education, equally important, perhaps in some ways creating the next generations of leaders in manufacturing and in other endeavors. And I think your background in operations and your history in manufacturing, and we went into this quite a bit on the episode when you were at Fender, just really, really informs the work that you're doing. And I think is going to make you just a phenomenal leader in that organization. Part of the job, as you look at your leadership role, is going to be connecting what you call the Belmont Data Collaborative, the Belmont Innovation Labs, the Story Studio, and Office of Education Innovation. So all really important endeavors taking place at Belmont University. Talk to us about these functions and then how you see these collaborating. How do you go about a project like that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I learned is I kind of plugged in and really got to get a sense of what Greg's ambition was, and then the ground that he was starting to till to get us there. And Greg is, he's a phenomenal leader, a caring leader, and a thinking leader. And I think that's certainly one of the things that attracted me to the university. So he's recognizing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the enrollment cliff later, but there's some challenges that are coming up in education, and we've got to think about who we are and then what differentiates us in the market. And I think if you take a look at the initiatives that we've started, one of the things that Belmont has prided itself on is it's a university of practice, right? There are research universities. There are universities that are really focused on the practice. And that could be the practice and the craft of teaching. It's, how do we educate our students to go out into the world and solve the world's most challenging problems? He's really, really honing in on how we do that the right way. So if you take a look at the labs that we're developing, it's really around entrepreneurship. It's around data, using data to kind of solve problems and work together. And then with an education innovation standpoint, it's how people are receiving and learning is changing. And I think what we're finding is we've got to do two things well. One is we've got to really train our students, our alumni, anyone who's connected to the university around how do we go after solving big problems again? And that's that entrepreneurial spirit. And then part two is how do we deliver educational content that's relevant in the market, that people see us as differentiated and want our product. And we've got to do that extraordinarily well.
Belmont has a reputation for our listeners as a, quote, most innovative university. So innovation is at the heart of so many things that you're doing. So a couple of thoughts, what areas of innovation are you most interested in, Ed? And then as you look at higher education, both going through your path and having certainly a knowledge of higher ed, but also being informed by your experience in corporate America, how do you think education needs to innovate to be relevant? So what innovation aspects interest you, and then how does higher ed need to innovate?
Great question. And I think, just the idea of entrepreneurship and just there's got to be a new definition for entrepreneurship. And, I'll reference Luke 12, to whom much is given, much is required.
One of my favorites. Yep.
And I think that is a model for entrepreneurship that we've got to embrace. And it's certainly one that's very much tied to the Christian tradition. And again, this is the connection to Greg and the university and the mission. It's like, if we all don't thrive, then none of us thrive. And I look at, healthcare, for example, in Nashville. It's we call it one of our right to impact areas. We've got an incredible collection of healthcare companies, universities, and businesses that are created that really positively impact health in the U.S. But if you look at some of our health outcomes in the city of Nashville, in the rural communities in Middle Tennessee and throughout Tennessee, the outcomes aren't lining up with all this incredible learning. And we've got to close that gap. We've got to figure out how to close that gap. And, we probably talked about this last time. This is the big and, right?
Right.
This is not an or conversation. We need to figure out how to generate great businesses. We've got to have a vibrant community, but we also have to take care of our community and make sure that, some of these outcomes are aligned to everyone flourishing together. And I think that's a critical part of what really makes this work attractive. Now, where did I learn some of this? So, when we launched the Fender Play Foundation, we worked with LA Unified because they were taking all of their day-to-day classes. And, we in a 6-week period, we developed a program that was 100% online for teaching guitar, right? So there were so many lessons, and I think that just elicited in me kind of a spark on, okay, how do we go about doing that? And the big theme was working together, right? Where before, we had conversations with LA Unified prior to the pandemic, and we had conversations with the superintendent. When the pandemic hit and there was a big need, it required us to work together. So industry partner, education partner, teachers working on the curriculum. So when everyone kind of focused on working together and problem solving, it really helped us. It drove all the innovation. It drove all the great thinking. It was a compressed timeline. We had to get stuff done. That sounds a lot like manufacturing operations, right?
Doesn't it?
So I think for me, kind of the big aha was a lot of those lessons that we learned and what makes a successful manufacturing operation or just operations in general. When we kind of submit to really good processes and project management and all those tools that we use, and then we work together to collaborate, we can solve big problems. And I think that's a big chunk of what we're doing right now with education innovation, with Belmont, with Greg's ambition. And, the idea is we've got to solve complex problems by working together.
Your whole aspect of it's an and, not an or, really, I'll be honest with you, from our last episode, really resonated with me. And I can't tell you how many times I've used that. And, I just think, and I don't want to get into politics, but, so many of the political, battles that are going on in our world right now, if we looked at some of those things as ands instead of ors, we don't have to pick between one side or another. There's good ideas that come from both directions. Let's find a way to use all that, toward the betterment of humanity, the betterment of the United States. Why not?
You know that from working in a factory. If we just threw rocks at each other all the time, we wouldn't be able to produce anything, right?
Exactly.
At some level, it's like, let's solve problems together. And when you build trust, and maybe that's the element that's missing, is we've forgotten how to trust each other, right?
Right.
Trust our intentions. But that's fundamental to great leadership, and certainly to great manufacturing and operations leadership is, you've got to trust in the mission and the people and invest and care that solving a problem is way more important than pointing one out.
Exactly. The world would be a much better place if everything was just one big Kaizen event, right? If we could just one big continuous improvement event, let's bring everybody together. Let's listen. Let's come up with great ideas. Let's execute and follow through on our commitments. So maybe that's a lesson for the planet. Who knows? As we think about the planet and we think here about the United States of America and some of the trends that are taking place here, demographics are really driving so many things. in education. You touched earlier on the enrollment cliff. Birth rates are declining. Students have a lot of different alternatives, and I think in some cases, in good ways, alternatives to four-year universities if they're pursuing a career path that requires a different type of training and preparation. But what is it going to take, Ed, in the future to attract the student of the future? Because the truth is, for higher education, there are going to be some winners and losers, I fear. And we're already seeing some, Cardinal Stritch University, which was one in my hometown, Milwaukee, that announced a couple of weeks ago that it's shutting its doors. Those demographic trends are real, and they're going to force some serious innovation in higher education. What is it going to take to attract those students in the future?
So I actually was on a panel with the CMO of Walmart, and we talked about, work for the Marine Corps, Harley-Davidson, Fender, companies that have been around for 50, 60, 70, 100 years, right? What you see is there's an ability to pivot at the right moment, right? They see the change wind blowing, they can change and they can drive organizational change to pivot so that they don't go out of business. And there was an interesting stat, I believe is 58 average tenure in the S&P 500 was around 60 some odd years. Today it's like 18 years, right? So what's happening is, although that's, kind of the creative destruction that's happening in the market right now, if your company or your organization doesn't smell or feel that change wind and learn how to adapt and learn, then they're not going to be around. And, we're acknowledging that, but organizations have to move past acknowledgement into action, right? So again, this is where Greg he's placing bets, right? Folks talk about wanting to make changes, but if they don't make any investments, then you don't get a return on investment. So we're making investments because we know data and technology is absolutely critical for leaders into the future. We know that, we want this idea of, what's this new sense of entrepreneurship that, we want everyone to flourish as we build build jobs and build new businesses in the community. So I think we're stitching together a really good story about where we want to go. But I ask this question all the time. Do I have a product that the market wants to buy? And then is my product differentiated in the market? And those are the filters that we're having a lot of conversations around as we think about how do we do something different, differentiated, but also kind of true and authentic. Because I think that's the other thing, Matt, that folks are looking for today in products and services. They want that sense of authenticity about who they're receiving those services from. And that's where I think Belmont is it just steps out to the forefront as, a community where ideas and even different ideas, we can live in a pluralistic society. Right. We've got to be able to work together, and we can't just shut each other down. And I think that's a place where I would want my kids educated.
Yeah,
so there's a final filter. Are we making good decisions that I'd want my kids and my grandkids to actually attend this university?
That's a great thermometer to kind of measure your efforts against, and in a really, really, I think, healthy way of looking at it. As you were going through that answer, I almost had a thought around private equity, believe it or not, and placing bets on different companies. And nobody has all the answers, right? And there's no strategy, whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're really in any endeavor that is going to work 100%. And so you have to kind of think about where do we feel most confident, about where we can make investments and then place bets on that investment. As you were saying that, it actually occurred to me the old adage that if you don't know who the sucker is at the poker table, then it's you. And I think about it in education. If you don't know which educational institutions aren't innovating, then it's probably you. Or if you don't know which ones are innovating, it's probably not you. Exactly. So really kind of thinking about that whole aspect.
Exactly. And there's got to be robust discussions. There's got to be, trust me, none of this is easy, right? And I love, and our educators and the professors and the faculty here are absolutely amazing. And what they do is they are experts in their fields. And sometimes it takes, a little bit of a troublemaker to go, hey, let's step back and see what's going on and think about the relevance of this material, both what we're teaching and how we're teaching it. And is there a market for it? Because if there's no market for it, for those of us who've been in business for a little while, that's not a good outcome for anybody. So we've got to force those conversations.
Absolutely. All the things that I got in trouble for when I was in junior high school, grade school, were the things that made me a better, made me a better executive. So being willing to disrupt a classroom or being willing to disrupt a market space, and that's not advocacy for every kid, not listening to their teacher or not playing by the rules, but there is something to be said for that, and certainly gave my,
you got to break a few eggs, right?
Exactly,
you got to break a few eggs to get to that omelet.
Exactly. And no doubt gave my educators, whether it was my high school teachers, my college professors and so on, a little bit of angst along the way. Kind of on that topic, you'll be stepping into that ring here before too long. You're, as you mentioned earlier, executive in residence for the Massey College of Business. That's going to include teaching in degree programs, stepping into the classroom and challenging and being challenged by the students that are in there. So a couple questions around that. I mean, first of all, is that a little harrowing? I mean, does that make you a little bit nervous stepping into that environment?
My siblings often kind of chide me and say, Ed Magee never met a microphone that he didn't like. So I am not afraid of getting in front of an audience and talking and sharing stories. And, I think that's certainly part of my Marine Corps experience and Harley-Davidson. Sure. I've been in big brands that love storytelling. And I think fundamentally great teachers are great storytellers.
Right.
And, there's authenticity and trust in the classroom and, a sense of let's go on a journey together and the ability to tell, great stories and great lessons. That's kind of core to what I've been doing for a big chunk of my lifetime. So I'm not afraid of that aspect. I think in learning how to do it well, and that's kind of some of the humility lessons that you learn when you're in manufacturing, right? Oftentimes folks go, they say, oh, I want to benchmark, and then they defend the status quo, right?
Right.
And I am just a student of leadership and student of learning. And I think what I have really, really tried to hone in on is before I can go out there and call myself faculty or, a teacher, I've got to go spend some time learning about the craft. And there are some folks here that are outstanding in the craft. And I'm making sure that I'm taking the time to invest and just hone the craft, because I can be a great storyteller. That doesn't mean I can teach a great, full semester course on any topic that I've got a lot of experience in. So I'm humbling myself to the journey. How about that?
Nice. I love it. Any tidbits so far that you've learned from those individuals that you'll be taking into the classroom?
It's delivery of your product to a different audience and a different mechanism, right? And you've got to learn what makes an effective outcome. I'm working with the guys in education innovation, and they're just amazing. So we're trying to figure out a new way to deliver online, online content. And I've taken online courses, and I'll give you a specific example. We're working on a product called intentional networking. So, a lot of folks they talk about their careers and, where they want to go. We're doing a specific class on how do you go from the network you have to the network you need for the next opportunity, right? And, that's a really relevant topic. So how do we make that interesting and compelling in an asynchronous environment? So educational innovation team, we're working on, it can't just be talking head, right? So just like me and you are having a dialogue, way more interesting than Ed just going blah, 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 regardless of how interesting.
We'll let the audience be the judge of that.
Well, I love this because, this is what human beings do to solve problems, right? You got to work together. But just breaking down the class content and say, hey, look, we want to make sure that the students are walking away with something. So we're creating, things activities that they can do where they can walk away and then remember Belmont. It's focused on the practice of. So how do I take this interesting thing, get a tool, and then go out and practice it so that I can get better at it? It's interesting watching this evolve and watching this happen. And I'm just loving seeing where it's going in terms of just how do we innovate to deliver a compelling and differentiated product?
Yeah, anytime you can put the words innovate and compelling and differentiated into one sentence, you're talking my language. I absolutely love that. And I think that's exactly right. So really, really interesting perspective there, Ed, and a great outlook on bringing all that you've learned into the classroom. There's no question that your students are going to be the beneficiaries of that. That's just incredible experience. Thinking about that experience outside of education, and because you're a manufacturing guy and so am I, and we kind of love chatting about our history in manufacturing. I just want to go a little deeper, and we've touched on some of this already with continuous improvement and so on, but how do you see your background in advanced manufacturing, Lean, Six Sigma, industrial technology? How does all of that knowledge influence the work that you're doing at Belmont?
I think it's just the filters that I put on when I approach a problem. Let me go back to the idea of factories are just people businesses, right? So I heard, oh, academia is different. It's different. It's different. And what I'm finding is it's a people business, right? And if you respect and communicate and have systems and process, I mean, you can lead folks down a journey to solve incredibly complex problems if you understand and respect them and their work, and and not get offended by what you don't understand, right? Take the time to invest in learning why they do what they do. So I think those lessons that we learn from being in the factory and solving problems together and taking the time to put your phone down, square up with another human being, look them in the eye, and say, all right, why are you concerned? Let's talk. That's a skill set. It's a skill set that, we operations professionals have if we're really delivering on, real change management. Those are some of the key lessons, especially as I've joined a new institution. You've got to respect the craft and the people who've been doing the work. And they will oftentimes have great perspectives that are, that can help influence and define what a better outcome looks like. One of my old bosses, Steve Phillips, and we may have talked about this, his quote was, "They won't care what you know until they know that you care," right? So taking the time to invest in, and we just spent an hour with education and innovation team, and how do we present this to the faculty or to the provost in a way that makes some of the tension that we have about delivering an outcome, they've got to feel a little bit of that. Go back to manufacturing, right? How do we get buy-in? How do we, so all of those lessons are applying themselves in kind of unique ways. And, the biggest one of all is, you got to respect the system and respect the game. And there are so many cool learning opportunities that I've experienced so far. It just makes me excited to come to work.
Yep, we can tell, we can feel the excitement on this end of the discussion here as well. As you were chatting there, Ed, a couple things came to mind, just life lessons that I've managed to learn over the course of a long time in executive leadership and so on. Really, really early on in my career, I was probably 25, 26 years old. I was the vice president of operations for an RFID manufacturing company really early on. And a mentor of mine and I got pulled into a sister company to just kind of help that company solve some problems and get on the right track. And so we got in there, and it was like a 4-week project, and we're 2 weeks in, and I'm like, you haven't made a single suggestion to help these people improve. And he was like, oh, that'll come. He's like, our job is to listen. And he said, we're going to spend 3 weeks listening, and then we'll spend a week kind of telling people what our observations are and getting their feedback. And that lesson just always stuck with me. It's a lifelong journey. And I don't even know that I'm even that good at that now, but I always go back to remembering that it's so important to kind of, it is. And it's a discipline, because you always want to jump in and solve problems. And if that's how you're wired, you can't wait to get to the problem solving part. And it's like, no, let's gather information. The other one, and I heard it throughout my career and made several jumps from RFID to metal finishing to fabrication and did a bunch of business consulting along the way. And every place you'd step into, well, I know that's how you did it there, but this place is different. This place is different. And every single one of them it has their differences, but there's a lot more similarities. Than there are differences in learning the nuances. Go ahead.
One of the other big lessons, I forget which mentor provided it, but he said every interaction with an employee is either a deposit or withdrawal in the trust bank. There's no middle ground.
Yeah.
So as I embark on, change, new environment, folks are learning about, me and who I am. I'm super conscious about every interaction. Again, yep. I think it's a skill and a discipline, right? You got to pay attention to, how's that person leaving this conversation? Are they leaving with deposits, the trust bank? Are they leaving with withdrawals? It's a practice, though. It's a discipline that you've got to practice.
Yeah, and a lifelong practice. An individual told me one time, there's another one that always stuck with me in executive leadership. He said, whatever you tell somebody, whether it's positive or negative, if you're a leader of that organization, multiply that message by 5.
That's
Multiply the
very
impact of that
interesting.
message. That if
Yes.
you may just think you're giving constructive criticism, but multiply the impact of that
How's
by
it
5.
received?
Yeah, exactly. Or
Mhm.
you may think you're just giving somebody an attaboy or a little bit of praise, and that's going to be multiplied by 5. That's another one that just
Love
always
that.
stuck with me. I liked your comment in the last answer when you talked about being conscious of, in your words, who I am and who is Ed Magee. I'll tell you what the dean of the Massey College of Business said, and I think in the press release announcing your new position, he said that your career is, quote, steeped in ethical leadership. Incredibly high praise, a pretty high bar to live up to, I would say as well. How would you define ethical leadership as you think about that praise that was bestowed on you?
Yeah, so I think ethical leadership is, it's about waking up every day committed to something that is greater than self, right? It's leadership where the leader is very steeped in a sense of what I am doing is not about me. It's not even about mission. It's about the people that I interact with to get all of this incredible stuff done, part one. And then part two is kind of like this new sense of entrepreneurialism. I think that's one that is weighing heavily on me today. I've learned all these incredible tools, of our capitalist, society, and they are incredible and they're powerful. But we've got to really think about the and conversation when it comes to entrepreneurship. How do we make sure that our communities, that our companies, that our employees are flourishing? We can't just have great businesses, right? We've got to have communities and families, and we've got to think about the entire ecosystem. And ethical leaders tackle tough problems, and they make tough decisions, and they make hard investments that drive outcomes that help everyone to flourish. And that's the sense of entrepreneurialism that I think we need to teach and educate and get our legislators and get our business leaders and everyone kind of focused on, because, we're all in this boat together, right? And we've got to start thinking that way. And I think that's one of the lessons of really engaging in corporate America that I'm really, really passionate about teaching. We've got to think about entrepreneurism as an and, not an or. And we've got to make these impacts in our communities.
And that philosophy is so well aligned with the mission of Belmont. And I want to just take a moment for our listeners to recite that mission. And it's, quote, "We are a Christ-centered, student-focused community developing diverse leaders of purpose, character, wisdom, and transformational mindset, eager and equipped to make the world a better place." You've already referenced Luke 12, I think, in our discussion today, and certainly I know how you're wired in that regard, but I would be interested in understanding how much is Belmont's focus on faith a factor in the decision that you made to move to the university?
Absolutely. And I will attribute this to Greg Jones's wisdom, because we're trying to figure out the communication systems and processes, right? So when he says we want to be the number one Christ-centered university in the world, what does that mean? And we're starting communication cascades, and I got to watch and observe the business school as the leader, the dean, Sarah Guardial, kind of delivered the message, and the team got into the discussion. And I'll tell you my observation and how I think this is real and relevant. What happened towards the end of the conversation was some of the individual teachers were articulating what it meant to them and how they delivered on that in a way that was authentic. And I mean, think about authenticity in delivering that message that I want you to go out and solve the world's most complex problem by being a diverse leader of character. Folks start believing that. That's when you start doing really, really good work. So at the end of the meeting, there were 3 almost testimonials from faculty and how they do that. That's the magic. That's the magic of transformation. And we've seen this when we've done like culture transformations in factories. If the leader is repeating the message, that's okay. That's how you get change started. But when folks internalize it and make it authentic and start saying, this is what it means to me, that's the magic.
Absolutely. A great way to think about where the university is going and being open to guidance, right? And whether that's human guidance or existential guidance, and I mean, being open to to the direction in which the organization is guided. I'm going to infer from that answer that the focus on faith was indeed a factor in your decision to move to Belmont.
Yeah, one other thing I think as we look at leadership, Matt, and I love this. So just the concept that we're starting to explore is, it starts with self. It starts with whole person formation. So before you can lead anyone else, you've got to be able to lead yourself. And that takes time and reflection. And, you want to go on that journey of discovery. Part two is you've got to learn leadership chops. You've got this blocking and tackling leadership. Absolutely. We want to make sure that we do it in a way that is reflective of our mission and purpose. And then the last piece, and I love this part, is we're incorporating the idea of what we did at Harley. It's just Edgar Schein. Leaders are creators of culture. So it's not just that you have to lead, but you've got to be conscious of the culture that you're creating, because that's where sustainability occurs, right? That's where you build up that organizational muscle around change. And I think looking at all three simultaneously as we kind of articulate a vision of where we're going in terms of leadership at the university, that's got me really, really excited.
Absolutely. Leaders 100% creators of culture. I'm a student of Patrick Lencioni, and what he would tell you is that culture is the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that guide and drive the organization. And I spent all my time thinking about that. And you're right. Once we've established our mission and our vision for the organization, deciding what the culture is, and then just everything comes back to that. And you're right. As a leader, your number one job is to make sure that you're, first of all, living up to the culture yourself, and then also coaching the rest of the team to do the same thing.
Yeah, one of my bosses said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So
yeah, every day. I love that one. Absolutely. So the last time you were on the podcast, Ed, I'm pretty sure we asked you the question around what advice would you have for, a high school sophomore. We're going to turn that question around a little bit, and we're going to picture young Ed Magee as a high school sophomore, maybe a 15-year-old, 16-year-old young man. If you could go back in time and give that individual one piece of advice, Ed, what would that be?
Listen to your parents. Now, I'm a parent now, so maybe I'm projecting what I want my kids to do. I think it's learn to trust in your worth. I think there's so much of the world, social media, social media is giving 4 billion people darts, and you just spend your day either doom scrolling or getting darts thrown at you. And I think spending time in the reflection of your own value, kind of doing the self work, the mirror work, is something that I would tell my younger self to, spend more time listening to you. Spend more time investing in this person that you're becoming, and not, there's Amy Crook who runs whole person formation. The way that she articulates it, I absolutely love. What she says is, social media just focuses on your accomplishments, on what you're accomplishing. She said, what we've got to do is get kids these days to focus on who they are becoming. Because on that journey of becoming, you're going to have wins, you have losses, you have successes, you're going to have failures, you're going to have all of this stuff. And as long as you're confident in that person that you're becoming, and you do that mirror work and that self-reflection, that gives you kind of the protection for all the crazy stuff that the world is throwing at you these days. So yeah, I tell that 15-year-old kid, spend some time focusing on self and who you're becoming.
I love that. One of the most transformational summers in my life was the summer that, for whatever reason, I drew the conclusion that it mattered a lot more what I thought of myself and what I thought of what I was doing than what anybody else thought of what I was doing. And it just absolutely changed my outlook on life. And I think it really comes back to recognizing that the worth and the value that you have in the world, and that your future accomplishments, your future influences on the lives of others, that's what it's all about. And that was just a hugely transformational moment for me. And sounds like very, very similar advice.
It builds confidence. I mean, it gives you a confidence to walk into the world and know that you're not always going to succeed. And that's okay. Who are you becoming, kiddo?
Exactly. Who are you becoming? We love the person that young Ed Magee has become. Obviously, just a stellar career, doing so many different things. Every time we spend time together, I'm invigorated. I'm actually optimistic for the future of America and the future of the globe. So thanks for instilling that optimism, not just in me, but in our listeners, on all the students and the faculty and staff at Belmont. Just a wonderful time today, Ed. Really appreciate you taking time.
Well, thank you. I feel the same way, Matt, and I look forward to helping to continue to change the world in a really positive way together with you. So anytime.
Indeed.
enjoy the heck out of these conversations.
I do as well. Together we go. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe, leave a review, and if you like this episode, share it with a friend. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so listen in next week.